Let's discuss the Chinese and Western medical thought. Diseases in Western medical thought, part 2. The scientific revolution of the 16th and or 17th century Europe laid the groundwork for the systematic merging of the classical and experimental science in the 19th century, such as the transformation of the Baconian science of heat into experimental and mathematical thermodynamics. By the second half of the 19th century, systematic experimentation took root in medicine, particularly in physiology, and the profession of medicine gained new institutional forms and enhanced intellectual standards as it leveraged state resources for scientific research. Hospital moved from church to state, and the emergence of hospital medicine, first in Paris, was characterized by scientific observation, pathological examination, and a detailed knowledge of anatomy. The shift from a stress on Galenic holistic views of humoral balance to the new anatomic pathological model would eventually lead to the discoveries of modern etiology. A major step forward was made with research on childbed fever in 1946, when Semmelweis observed that the mortality rates of women after childbirth varied with hygiene conditions, leading him to the conclusion that childbed fever was caused by decaying matter. Semmelweis used a hypothesis testing methodology to infer that childbed fever was caused by cadaveric matter transmitted by doctors and students conducting autopsies in the hospital. Some 40 years later, a monocausal model of disease was proposed by Pasteur and Koch, who had earlier isolated the tubercle bacillus. The Henry Koch postulates that states that a parasite occurred in every case of the disease in question and occurred in no other disease as a fortuitous and non-pathogenic parasites, in effect insisting on one-to-one correspondence between disease and parasite. Coates called this approach a disease causation etiological standpoint. By the beginning of the 20th century, the etiological standpoint drove much of the medical research. Bacteriology opened up the vision of finding biological agents to destroy them, and eventually to the development of the antibiotic penicillin through the work of Fleming and Fleury. The use of antibiotics to combat disease-causing bacteria was a radical departure from Galenic and Chinese medicine that caused medication only to restore balance and resolve internal obstructions. However, other important diseases defied such straightforward etiological explanations. One such disease was beriberi, whose cause required a new deficiency theory of disease. The etiological standpoint had to be widened to include deficiency of certain organic chemicals essential to the body. Viruses presented a new set of problems. When viruses were involved, medical scientists found that cause of disease were more complex than could be explained by the simple etiological standpoint. For example, rhinoviruses are associated with only 20 to 25% of the common cold syndrome and are active mostly in the autumn. Furthermore, many viral infections are asymptomatic. Viruses are also thought to be linked to some forms of cancer, but seem to be neither necessary nor sufficient for the cancers to occur. Looking at the broad range of diseases as single cause can result in a spectrum of clinical syndromes, and same effect could result from several different causes depending on the nature of the causative agent, the environment in which it operates, and the characteristics of the involved host. In the case of chronic then infectious illness like heart disease, the complexity is such that epidemiologists prefer to talk about risk factors rather than causes. The situation is even murkier with subclinical epidemiology, subclinical illness in which the patient experiences no obvious symptoms occur not only in infectious diseases, when infection occurs without disease, but also in chronic diseases. Many of the causes of disease are so ubiquitous that almost everyone has been exposed to them, and it is often not clear what makes disease develop in some, but not in others. As the noted epidemiologist Alfred Ivan puts it, it is the search for a clinical illness promotion factor for a given disease that poses the real challenge. Because this is the third ingredient in disease causation, in addition to microbiological agents and deficiencies in the body. The difficulties in the meaning of disease causation arise itself. Hence, it is helpful to refer to philosophical discussions of causation and consider its relevance to disease causation and to the TCM view of illness and health. Thank you for your attention.